Okay, we're going to get started. So my name is Mavis Pogue. I am a assistant professor, CIS specialist at Community College of Philadelphia, and today we will be discussing developing self-efficacy in adult learners. So our table of contents consists of what is self-efficacy. We're going to discuss efficacy beliefs and efficacy outcomes, the adult learner, the learning theory, which is andragogy, developing self-efficacy, Lyman's key assumptions of adult learners, online learning and the online learner, computer self-efficacy. And I have this in parentheses, computer, because you need self-efficacy to get computer self-efficacy. Digital literacy or competence, which means you may see different ways that digital literacy is stated, and the makings for self-efficacy. Self-efficacy. What is self-efficacy? It's the belief in one's ability to influence the events that affect one's life and control over the way their events are experienced. This means control over their environment. You have to believe that you have the ability to complete a particular task. We can look at self-efficacy as a noun. It's the person's estimate or personal judgment of his or her personal sense of personal power, or as a verb, which is the positive subjective assessment of one's ability to cope with a given situation. You can believe in your ability to go through steps necessary to produce a desired outcome. That's what we're looking when we talk about self-efficacy. And so it's not just computer, it's everything you do. We don't want to get it mixed up with self-esteem because that's a general sense of our strengths. Self-efficacy is more specific to a situation. For example, a person with high efficacy, because self-efficacy in an area, is more likely to believe that they can control the outcome of a situation. It's like a student who takes math and they believe, yeah, I can do really well. I study hard. I'll get a good grade. So they feel they control the situation. Where a person with low self-efficacy says, oh, no matter how much studying I do, I can't pass this test. So it's believing in yourself to be able to complete a particular task. Efficacy beliefs. And this is by Bandura, 1984. He's the originator of the theory of self-efficacy. So he names four resources: mastery experiences, vicarious experiences, verbal persuasion, emotional and psychological states, and imaginary experiences. The mastery experience is the first and foremost. In other words, you have to have direct experience to master a situation. Say if you're working on a computer, you have to have that direct connection with that computer to master that computer. However, it is the most powerful of the experiences. And the success in mastering the task of controlling the environment will build your self-belief in yourself, whereas failure will undermine the efficacy belief. You must have diligence in your sense of self-efficacy because it requires the experience to overcome through your effort and perseverance. Success experiences are experiences you see when you observe people like role models. You see these people and you're like, wow, the president of the United States, their teacher, a family member, they have succeeded and you consider them a role model. So you observe what they do. And then you tell yourself, I see those same similarities in me. So I can succeed also. To master the activities I need to be successful. Verbal persuasion includes individuals whose lives are influenced by their parents, their teachers, their managers, and their coaches. We see this a lot in education if you've taken the education courses, that it actually says this environment affects you the most. So we must be persuaded through our environment that we have the capabilities again to master certain activities. So therefore we're most likely to put in the effort and sustain even when problems arise. The fifth one is emotional and psychological states. Fourth one is emotional and psychological states. This is your state of mind. That means how do you feel? If you feel depression or stress, then you can this dampens your confidence, and it can be interpreted as signs of a way that you're going to be a poor performer. So we have to have a state of mind that judges our self-efficacy. We have to have positive emotions. For us as instructors, we should have empathy, support, and reinforce learning. This boosts the confidence of one's skills. The last one is imaginal experiences. And this actually was added in by James Maddox. He suggested that there was a fifth root to self-efficacy, and that was visualizing yourself as a successful person, behaving effectively and successful in any given situation. So again, this is your estimate of personal judgment of your own ability to succeed in in finishing a particular goal, like studying well to do on the test. Well, studying more to do well on the test. Sorry, one more than I wanted to go back. Efficacy outcomes. So Bandura says by 1997, he says the outcomes are mastery, competence, and confidence. So we look back at the four sources, we can put these together. So mastery experiences is that directness to master a task or control of environment. That's your mastery. Vigorous experiences is believing that you can master these tasks or control the environment from one's belief in their role models. This gives you the same capabilities and shows competence. Verbal persuasion of influential people strengthens one's beliefs in our in our capabilities that one can master certain activities and put more effort to sustain when problems arise. This is where we get our competence from. Emotional and psychological states of positivity promotes one's beliefs that possesses the confidence to master the task and the confidence to work through problems to accomplish the task. And finally, imaginary experiences promotes that visual experience of one's estimate of personal judgment and one's ability to succeed and to be effective in accomplishing a task. So as you see the picture, that's what's happening. Finally, you're climbing the mountain. You're a whole person because you have reached the mastery, competence, and confidence that self-efficacy gives you. Everything I need to know from a child's book. So on the left, you see actually this child's book, and it's showing the different, you're learning about birds, history, fashion, animals, biology, science. And on the right, you have the adult learner who also says, yeah, I learned everything from a children's book. So that's why I got my ideal on how to play games, graduating, getting a career, how love works, how my finances work. So you learn more about life, love, careers, entertainment, technology, etc. from what you learn from a children's book. Now, pedagogy is the most popular learning theory, but in Greek it means leader of child. And it was first introduced in the monasteries to the young males between grades 7 to 12 to be faithful servants to God. So this became that teacher-centered way of learning. Now, the beginning of the traditional learning where the student is the vessel. This is the traditional learning. And so you're filled with the knowledge of the teacher with no input in the learning process. But in today's digital world, this has changed. We learn And the majority of college students are over 32 years of age, who are called what we non-traditional students. These are students who have left school and now they have financial responsibilities, maybe family responsibilities. So now they're returning to school to pursue a career or for promotional purposes or just personal gratification. So the adult learner needs to know why in a student learning environment where they must be part of the learning process. They have to be successful, and self-efficacy gives them that belief to be successful. The adult learner. So who is the adult learner? We could say anyone over the age of 18, but then we could go back to pedagogy and say, well, yeah, they're still a child because they still haven't learned much. But the adult learner can be anyone definitely over the age of 30, or the non-traditional student. And this student is coming back to school and they want to know why they need to learn something. So these are the 6 principles of anagogy. And they are need to know, self-concept, prior experiences, readiness to learn, orientation to learning, and motivation. So let's go back to the first one. They need to know. They want to know, why do I have to learn this before undertaking it to learn? So this is very evident if you work with non-traditional students. You could get, why do I have to do this homework? You know, I'm a little familiar with this. Why do I have to do the same thing over again? But they need to know, and we need to be able to answer those questions. The self-concept of the learner is this self-directedness or autonomous. That means they can do things on their own. The self-concept develops the deep psychological need to be seen by others and treated by others as being capable of the self-direction. Self-efficacy is the confidence to be autonomous, to be self-directed. And to do this, you also are able to attain computer self-efficacy, which we'll discuss later. Prior experiences of the learner. We have to recognize that adults have a greater volume and a different quality and kind of experiences. They have accumulated more experiences, and therefore they have a wider range of individual differences. They are the same in the terms of background, learning style, motivation, needs, interests, and goals. Prior experiences tend to contribute to mental habits, though, to bias and presuppositions. And this causes ones to close their minds to new ideals, fresh perceptions, and alternate ways of thinking. Self-identity is what we need to look at on the prior experiences, because how do we identify ourselves? How do adults identify themselves? As a child, our identity is derived from external definers, like our parents, our environments, the church we go to, our siblings, our peers. And to us, experiences is something that just happens. But as we mature, our self-identity is how we define ourselves in terms of those experiences. And that as adults, that experience is our self-identity. Therefore, if we ignore the experiences or devalue the experiences of adult learners, they perceive this as rejecting them as people, rejecting them as a person. Readiness to learn. Adults become ready to learn when they need to know and are able to do so in order to cope effectively with their real life situations. So this is another difference between adults and children, or I say 18 to 25 or 30, because they really have, as I said earlier, they have responsibilities. So their life and their experiences, they want to know how this is going to affect their real life situations and how it's going to work into that. The readiness to learn can be done by developmental tasks associated from moving from one development stage to another. So this is the cognitive or physical skill that an individual has to learn in order to move on. And this can take place during certain times in their lifetime, like going to school to get a degree to move on to a career. They have to be orientated to learning. So learning in schools when K through 12 is usually subject centered. But as adults, adults need to be life centered or task centered or problem centered. They need to be motivated to perceive that the learning they are receiving will help them perform tasks or deal with problems that they confront in their everyday lives. The new knowledge, understanding, skills, and values and attitudes are most effective when we present them in the context of application to real life situations. Then motivation. Motivation is their intrinsic value, the value from within. How do I feel within? What's my personal payoff? What's my reward to oneself? This means you can engage in something and not expect to be rewarded for doing it. It's like reading a book and being satisfied that you read the book and realizing your potential from reading the book or mastering any skill. Developing self-efficacy. How can we develop self-efficacy? Number one, there's a need to explain why specific things are being taught. Certain commands, functions, operations. We see this a lot, especially in using computers. I mean, nowadays we use computers for even the proprietary software, you know. So, excuse me, I was hearing the sound in the background. But explain why specific things are being taught. We couldn't use computers for, we use proprietary software like My Math Lab and other software to actually help the student learn. But again, they want to know why am I being taught these things? Why do I need to know these things? So Tuck found that when adults undertake to learn something on their own, they will invest considerable energy because they want to gain the benefits from learning it, and they know the negative consequences from not learning it. Self-concept steps into this again because adults resent and resist situations in which they feel others are imposing their wills on them. Now, that's where I look at the pedagogy, because now we're back to teacher-centered learning. And this can cause a serious problem in education. And I have dealt with, in my position as a support specialist, I have dealt with adult students up to 91 years of age. And a lot of times they come with that, I don't know why the teacher treats me like a child. So we have to be aware that you have adults in your classrooms, adults who have financial responsibilities, who might even be as old as the instructor or older. So those are things we have to look at in our learning and in our instructing in the learning process. Any activity that is labeled education or training or anything that may be synonymous with it, sometimes adults reject this. They put on their dunce hats of dependency, fold their arms, sit back, and say, teach me. Treating adults as children creates a conflict within them between their intellectual model. The learner wants to be dependent so they need self-directing. Efforts can be made to create learning experience in which the adults transition from dependent to self-directing learners or their autonomousness. The readiness to learn. Instruction should be task-oriented in it instead of memorization. Learning activities should be in the context of common tasks to be performed. They should have a readiness to learn. Use life-related experiences in their learning. Use developmental tasks to move the student from one task to another. Have timed learning experiences coincide with those developmental tasks. Mastery of one task before moving on to another during a certain time, such as a day, a week, etc. Ways to induce readiness to learn is through exposure to models of superior performance. Career, counseling, simulation exercise. Orientation to learning is also here. Use problem-centered and contextual learning. Implement learning around tasks and problems that are confronted in everyday life or real-life situations. Reinforcement is required for this point. It's critical. You can use things like scaffolding. Introduction should take into account the wide range of different backgrounds of learners, learning materials, and activities should allow for different levels, types of previous experience with computers. And this goes back to our previous experiences, prior experiences. Instructors should use resources, mental models. And a mental model is just the explanation of someone's thought process about how something works in the real world. We need to recognize individual characteristics and try to provide learning strategies and resources to meet these needs. Some of these are considered now active learning, experimental learning, transformative learning. Since adults are number 4, since adults are self-directed, instruction should allow learners to discover themselves for themselves, discover things for themselves, providing guidance and help when mistakes are made. Emphasis in adult education is on experimental techniques. Techniques such as group discussion, simulation exercises, problem-solving activities, case methods and laboratory methods, and a greater emphasis on peer helping activities. To improve the effectiveness of the learner's performance or the quality of their lives, recognize the individual differences in planning the environment, be supportive, direct students to available support service, reinforce learning through tutoring, counseling, be empathetic. Many adult learners have jobs or family responsibilities, as I mentioned earlier. Then you want to present potent tools for raising the level of awareness that are real and simulated experiences in which the learners discover for themselves the gaps between where they are and where they want to be. And this can be learned by using digital technology, library resources, community resources, college resources. And also here we see motivation, rewards, certificates, degrees, promotional, personal accomplishment. This is all where adults want to be. Lindeman's key assumptions. So Lindeman talks about what are the key assumptions for adult learners. They are motivated to learn as they experience needs and interests that learning will satisfy. Adults' orientation to learning is life-centered. Experience is the richest source for adults' learning. Adults have a deep need to be self-directing. Individual differences among people increase with age. So, adults' orientation to learning is life-centered. So we want to make sure that your appropriate units for organizing adult learning is around life situations and not so much around subjects. The experience being the richest adults resource for adult learning means that the core methodology of adult education is analysis of their experiences. Adults have that deep need to be self-directed, so the role of the teacher is to engage in a process of mutual inquiry with them in a student-centered learning environment. Do not use that teacher-centered environment where the instructor transmits his or her knowledge to the adult learner and then want them to evaluate their conformity to it. They want them to say, okay, this is what the teacher says, and I have to conform to it. Again, they're going to come back with that need to know. Why am I doing this? Individual differences among people increase with age. Therefore, adult education must make optimum provisions for differences in style, time, place, and pace of learning. Creates and implement individualized life plans. Now, this can be accomplished by allowing students to be involved in the lesson plan. And I know a lot you go, well, wow, how can I do that? We just the keynote speaker just talked about UDL. I have down here also, I've mentioned that we need to work together as instructors within the same discipline in lower and higher level classes to provide uniform, reusable learning modules. And these can be updated with minimum revisions. And again, Robin talked about this earlier about coming together, collaborating as disciplines, and not just in the same discipline, but also in other disciplines. So as the student moves on, there's like a flow of developmental stages from one step to another. We also want to examine the learning styles of digital learners because then this may shed some light on why some of them accept or reject technologies. Adult learners with experience are self-conscious, goal-oriented, and have different reactions times and also are very collaborative. But without successful technologies integration, it is reasonable to say the students without the necessary digital tools cannot reach the goals demanded in this techno industry. Online learning and online learners. And I decided to touch base on this, and I have to because in talking about computer self-efficacy, this is one of the most essential components of online learning for online learners. So why do we have online learning? Because the institutions have incorporated this because it has grown so much. Look at what has just happened now. We're just with the pandemic, we have a lot more online learning or remote learning. Now we have to make sure we have the implementation of technology where it needs to be. We have to use digital technology for instructional purposes. It's an important component of education, and it influences the learning process of today's students. The online learner must be capable of learning, goal-oriented, computer literate, and effective in accomplishing learning outcomes. Students need to possess digital competencies and literacies in a knowledge-driven society. The digital learner in the role as an online learner is required to use technology to attain skills and knowledge needed to meet course objectives. Learners with positive attitudes towards learning in online classes are positive in self-efficacy. The interaction and interactivity are components of online environments. Self-directed learning is influenced by the levels of self-efficacy for interaction and interactivity in these online environments. Self-efficacy can change depending on one's personal experiences and familiarity with technology used in any activity. Computer self-efficacy and digital literacy competence. What is computer self-efficacy? Self-efficacy, as we discussed earlier, refers to one's judgment about one's own competence to perform tasks needed to achieve an unexpected or expected performance, and a central component to one's motivation since it impacts your decision making about what to invest in a given situation. In other words, I need to find out, okay, if I'm taking the test, what should I study? Should I take notes? Should I go back to the book? Should I do research? So that impacts, that's your decision making. What do you invest? How do you invest in this, in that given situation? By taking notes, by doing research? As a student learning in digital classrooms, needs to have self-efficacy. You need to be able to reach information sources through digital tools. You need to use these resources efficiently. And when I say that, there's so much information out there, but you need to be able to break down and find the relative information that you're looking for. Significant for students to achieve success in a digital classroom is self-efficacy. It determines the learning, the motivation, and the academic success. So self-efficacy is an important component of learning. Students' experience in technology uses is a determinant of self-efficacy. This online technology self-efficacy, or it can be called computer self-efficacy, or CSE, refers to individual beliefs about their ability to successfully use computers to solve tasks and manage situations. Computer self-efficacy is a positivity that one experiences when using digital. It is essential that digital learners believe in one's capabilities to use today's digital technologies. They need to be able to adapt to developing technology in the future or new technologies. Computer self-efficacy exerts a significant influence on the individual's expectations or outcomes from using digital technologies. It also affects one's emotional reaction to computers, anxiety, as well as their computer usage. The level of online learners' ability to be self-efficacy influence their academic performance, and it's also dependent again on computer self-efficacy and their usage. The degree of CSE is essential to effective learning and is achieved by excessive exposure and familiarity to technology. Prior computer experience aids in this. It aids in attaining computer self-efficacy to be superior learners in an online environment. Studies have showed that extensive exposure to digital technology contributes to high self-efficacy in technology and usage, exhibits positive effects in formal learning. And when I talk about formal learning, that's learning that students do at school. We can equate common tasks using synchronous and asynchronous communication to processing, and creating. Most students are more adept to common tasks than sophisticated tasks required in academia. That means we know a lot in the community colleges, a lot of students come in and they really don't know how to use the office products, which they need to be able to use to go through college. I get a lot of adult students that come in and their idea was, I'm coming in and I'm going to learn the computer, and lo, surprise, behold, you need to already know how to use the computer. So is it the chicken before the egg? Most students are more, studies show that computer self-efficacy changes over time as familiarity with top technology spawns that confidence and increases computer self-efficacy. One ahead. Okay. Digital competency or digital literacy. You can, just like with computer self-efficacy, you can see online technology self-efficacy as being interchangeable. You can see digital literacy or competency. You can see that change to be digital literacy or competency. But the digital literacy is needed in online environments. You need to have the ability to use that technology to communicate via connected networks, because you're working with nodes, you're working with people, and you're working with computers. And you need to know how to network with those. Manipulating information in knowledge society, the inclusion of the internet and computers for the acquisition of knowledge and skills using digital technologies, the cultural competence that requires the learner to be self-directed in a digital society, impacts the evolution of information and communication technologies, and it influences other environments. So, students can put forth more effort in learning new technologies than performance because of the strong desire to learn digital literacy. Digital competency presents a challenge, though, today worldwide in the present educational systems of the 21st century. The key is the learner understanding how to negotiate and identify changes in literacy as changes occur, and the relationship between informal and formal learning. And that's the relationship between using office products and using Facebook or blogs or wikis. the relationship between the two, which we find ourselves in online learning starting to use a lot more. Blogs, our discussion questions are basically blogs. Basic skills in digital literacy requires individuals to use the email, word processing, and gather information from the web. They should be capable of expanding these skills to use mobile technology. Someone considered to be digital literate uses software and hardware in effective ways. They can research, find reliable data sources, and correspond verbally, and write efficiently. They can develop problem solving and critical thinking skills for making correct choices. They are efficient and effective in seeking and retrieving the information required. They are knowing how to select the appropriate digital technologies for the appropriate solution. Learners actively participate using digital technology in all aspects of their lives, and they develop skills for working with different individuals and teams to achieve a desired goal. Social media offers that informal way of learning in online environments. An individual uses digital technologies to perform repetitive, focused means for engaging in activities, though are always time consuming. The more technologies that are employed, the stronger the influence of digital technology. In other words, activities for learning do not have to be identical in informal and formal learning environments, but similar as border crossing or bridges between the practices. The makings for self-efficacy. We've just started and we have a long way to go. So what do we have to look at? What are the makings of self-efficacy? Digital competency, engagement, and motivation. Digital competency promotes digital literacy and computer self-efficacy. Engagement involves the person in the learning process, in the collaborative process of learning, in community of learners or communities for learning. Then you have motivation, intrinsic rewards, because it has to come within. The person has to be motivated to not just want to learn because they need to be rewarded, but because it's just a personal desire. The transformations include a shift in the role of the teacher from being the sole source of information to a more complex role. They need to be able to negotiate lesson objectives with students, provide a varying degree of support for different students, monitor student progress, encourage reflection on classroom activities. Students also need to take a more active role in their own learning process by using technology to search for and correlate information, publish and share their findings. I hear someone talking in the background, I guess. They are now more engaged and are able to make better connections between their previous learning experience and the new concepts or principles being taught. Today, digital technologies help us to seek and provide resources and information, express ourselves, communicate with others, create, consume, and play, and often assume new and multiple identities. And this is when you go on each platform, you assume multiple identities. Therefore, possessing computer self-efficacy is critical to the online learning environment because it promotes digital competency, engagement, and motivation. I see we have a lot of talking in the background, but we're to the last slide here. Gandhi perfectly understood the pivotal role that self-belief plays in our lives. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words become your actions become your habits become your values become your destiny. The greatest emphasis for learning should be placed on individualization of teaching and learning strategies, and the richest resources for learning resides in adult learners themselves.
The defensive tactics aspect of things as well as the
So that ends the presentation. I have the contact information if you want to contact me. I have a couple of, when I was talking about goal and goal visualization, I actually have a couple of little pamphlets that I purchased that can give you exercises on how to visualize a goal, which might be good for you to work with the students with. So I will be glad to send you any of that information that you want, and I hope you enjoy the
training where there
presentation.
live scenarios.
Okay.
All different kinds of scenarios that